877-373-7425.
I'm chuckling here as we come back from commercial break. We rarely get phone callers onto the show. You're welcome to call in. Agree, disagree, ask questions, whatever. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. But if the Facebook feed gets unstable, holy Lord, do we get phone calls from people complaining. Okay. A little bit more on Kaepernick before we get into the other stuff here. So here are the details from Stephen A. Smith that he points out. Kaepernick was going to do the training at the Atlanta Falcons practice facility. It's state of the art. There would be NFL personnel there. There'd be equipment. There'd be video. There'd be all sorts of things there. And all of the people who were going to go see Kaepernick headed to Flowery Branch. The Atlanta Falcons training facility is in Flowery Branch, up 985, headed to Gainesville. And they all headed that way. And then Kaepernick announced he was actually going to do it at a high school football field in Riverdale, Georgia, by the airport. So completely opposite direction from where he was going to do it. And he was going to do it in public and stream it on YouTube. And Smith, this is Smith saying he doesn't want to play. He wants to be the martyr. Guess what? It ain't working this time. All of us believe Kaepernick would have showed out. And if he showed out, he would have had a job within 2 weeks, but it didn't happen because he didn't show. He wanted to show up at a high school in Georgia, not an NFL facility, and then he wanted to put it on YouTube, run it YouTube Live. You don't want to work. You just want to make noise. You want to be in control of the narrative. It's over. When you got Stephen A. Smith, a guy who has been a champion of Kaepernick, blasting Kaepernick, saying this is all for show, you know Kaepernick's got problems. He overplayed his hand. He's not going to get that job in the NFL. Kaepernick does want to be a martyr, and there are a lot of people in the media who want to make him a martyr. They don't like the NFL. They don't like the Redskins. Man, you know who doesn't like the Redskins? Washington hates the Redskins right now. I have not kept up on this, but my buddy Jamie Dupree, who works with me at Cox Media, he sent me a note this morning and said, you know, the real scandal in Washington and is getting bipartisan outrage is the Redskins. People are actually chanting at the game, sell the team, sell the team. It has nothing to do with the team name. It has to do with the team's performance. People are really upset with the state of play of the Redskins right now. They're giving up. The Redskins tickets just a few years ago were sold out. You can get them now online for less than the price of a movie ticket in Washington, D.C. It is amazing. I've got friends of mine who are lifelong Redskins fans who grew up in Northern Virginia. The Redskins were the home team, went to every game, and they don't go anymore. They don't even want to watch the game. They're so disgusted with it. So I'm at this event last night with Nikki Haley at the Jewish Center in Atlanta, and you've got the Marcus area. There's the Arthur Blank has contributed money. Bernie Marcus has contributed money. I thought about making a dig about the Falcons at the thing, although they did beat the Saints, so they got that going for them. But I decided I probably better not since Arthur Blank had given so much money to the place. It would have been rude. But man. Kaepernick is going to be toast. He decided to politicize everything. Well, the Democrats are coming to Atlanta. Pete Buttigieg is going to be on tour, running around the state. We're going to hear a lot of them on Thursday. I will give you, so I'm going to be gone tomorrow with Christy for her oncology scans, and I'll be back on Wednesday. And on Thursday, I believe David Perdue he's going to call me early Thursday, and we're going to record an interview together to discuss the Democratic debate. And I will record the phone call and play it for you on Thursday. The Democrats will debate Wednesday night at Tyler Perry's studio. It's going to be the all-female debate, MSNBC. They're going to be an all-women panel. In the run-up to this, Kamala Harris is being told by Democrats she should get out of the race, that she's going to damage her reputation long-term. New polling in California has Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and Pete Buttigieg beating Kamala Harris in California, where she is the senator for the state of California. She's run a terrible campaign as she heads to Georgia.
I want to talk about Kamala Harris really quickly before we got it, because Kamala Harris, to me, is a candidate that seems to fill all those boxes. She would be fundamental change. She's a woman of color. I cannot explain why she isn't resonating more, because the fundamentals of her still seem really good to me if you want somebody who will change the perspective of what America looks like.
Right.
But not have as much change as maybe people think Warren is too much change.
So that's Joy Reid on MSNBC. You've got actually a report out over the weekend that maybe it's racism that's keeping Kamala Harris down. People don't like her because she's black, which that would be a problem in the Democratic primary, because why? They gave it to Barack Obama, but she's too black. I don't understand the thinking here. That tends to be the narration of a candidate who is losing, the narration of a candidate who is lost, their narration of a candidate who is on the verge of collapse and is desperately clinging to excuses. And the excuse she's hit on is, I'm black. They don't like me because I'm black. Cory Booker's not saying that. Deval Patrick just got in. He's black. They're not saying that. Barack Obama didn't have that problem. Why is it that Kamala Harris is the one that suddenly it's because she's a black woman? That's what it is. Yeah, that's the actual excuse here, folks, is that Kamala Harris is a black woman. And if she were a black man, everyone would be okay. But because she's a black woman, she's not supposed to. Listen, I'm giving you the excuse. Don't be mad at me. Don't you be mad at me for saying this. This is exactly what the people close to Kamala Harris are saying, is that she's a black woman. And it's the black plus woman thing that's the problem. One more time on this, Joy Reid. Joy Reid, the woman who the FBI is still investigating, who said those nasty things on her website. This is her.
I want to talk about Kamala Harris really quickly before we got it, because Kamala Harris, to me, is a candidate that seems to fill all those boxes. She would be fundamental change. She's a woman of color. I cannot explain why she isn't resonating more, because the fundamentals of her still seem really good to me if you want somebody who will change the perspective of what America looks like.
Right.
But not have as much change as maybe people think Warren is too much change.
So, in other words, she's a black female, so she gives you change and diverse change, but she's not as radically to the left as Elizabeth Warren, so you're not as rebellious. This goes back to the Barack Obama comment from earlier. Barack Obama saying the Democrats don't need to elect or nominate a revolutionary right now. And they're having all sorts of problems with poor Kamala, who is flailing about, not exactly sure what she's doing, where she's headed, what's going on. The problem here is that Kamala Harris doesn't really understand what she believes. She's flip-flopped on pretty much every issue out there. She has taken every position, competing positions at times, on various things she can't explain. Elizabeth Warren, for all of her faults on Medicare for All, and there's more and more data showing that that's going to sink her. In fact, as she has staked her name to Medicare for All, Pete Buttigieg is now ahead of her in Iowa. For all of her faults, though, she came out with a plan. She's come out with a plan, and she's defended her plan. She may not be able to pay for her plan, and she's having to lie about the edges and extremities of her plan, but she's got a plan. Kamala Harris doesn't have a plan. She doesn't have a plan on anything. She changes her mind. She is Trumpian in that regard, in that the president, as I mentioned earlier, can take a position and reverse himself on the position. Take vaping. Vaping is a great example here. The president is walking back his vaping ban. The president was going to ban vaping and is now not going to ban vaping. Kamala Harris was for Medicare for All, and then she's not for Medicare for All. She's for criminal justice reform, and then she's not, and then she is, and then she's for nuance in it. She's for marijuana legalization, and then she's not. There is not an issue under the sun that Kamala Harris has not taken multiple positions. And it's not just one or two positions. It's not just flip-flopping back and forth. She's taking multifaceted positions on things where there should be an A or a B and not a C through Z. And somehow on many of these positions, Kamala Harris is able to find positions A through Z to infinity and beyond. I mean, she's making a 26-letter alphabet run to infinity with her various positions. It's bizarre. It is genuinely bizarre to see a candidate who is elected in California, who was the state attorney general in California, get to Washington and run for president and flail around desperately. And by the way, you should know this, that behind the scenes, the Republican senators in Washington, this is what I find so interesting. Republican senators in Washington would far rather hang out with Kamala Harris than with Elizabeth Warren, which I find striking. Elizabeth Warren has people around her very Hillary-like saying, she's a very warm and caring person behind the scenes. But behind the scenes, the Republican colleagues tell me that she actually, Elizabeth Warren actually is not that warm and friendly, and she's a difficult person to hang around with. Just socially and in conversation with her, having a meaningful conversation about life. But with Kamala Harris, she's actually a warm and funny person, and they're fine to hang out with her. To the extent they do, which isn't often, but I've never had a Republican senator tell me that Kamala Harris isn't approachable. I've had multiple Republican senators tell me that Elizabeth Warren is not an approachable person, and I find that very interesting. And yet, on the campaign trail, she is floundering about, which she probably does need to get out. There's a political article right now that someone needs to tell Kamala Harris to get out. No one wants to tell Kamala Harris to get out. They're scared to tell her she needs to get out. What I find so hilarious is that they're doing it on super secret double background so that nobody knows who it is. Nobody wants to be public telling her. Now, let's move to Georgia, to a politician that a lot of people didn't like and suddenly have decided they like. That would be Brian Kemp. I mentioned the AJC polling the other day, but I also mentioned how the AJC is taking its poll and breaking it into sections and running stories every day on different sections. And the one was how the president's going to have a problem. The second was on David Perdue. The third was on climate change. And now we've gotten to the Brian Kemp edition of the AJC coverage of the AJC poll. I have gone through ad nauseum why the poll was wrong. It was taken over a 10-day period, which is not good for polling. It was taken with too many graduate voters, which isn't representative of Georgia. The president only got 41% of the registered voter pool, which isn't good because he actually got 50% of the state. So that suggests the poll oversamples graduates who tend to lean Democrat. It also oversampled Democrats in general, which is a problem. And yet Brian Kemp got 54% of the vote. Job approval, 54%. You make adjustments, he's over 60%. In fact, I've talked now to multiple pollsters who are telling me they've seen polling in the state of Georgia where Brian Kemp is over 60% among voters. Large samples of people who voted in 2018. They are able, you can go to the Secretary of State and you can get a list of people who voted in 2018. And you can cross-reference those to numbers and then have a computer randomly sample those people. You don't know whether they're Democrats, you don't know whether they're Republicans, but you can get your vote sample from people who were actually voters in 2018. And if you get your vote from people who actually voted from 2018 and you survey 1,000 of them and you do an accurate statistical sample between Democrats, Republicans, and independents based on the turnout model of 2018 or 2016 or a combination of the two, you can get a pretty accurate poll of what people think. And it turns out when you do that, when you base your polling based on the pool of people who voted in 2018, which, by the way, oversamples Democrats. It oversamples Democrats because Republicans turned out at a midterm level and Democrats turned out at a presidential level. So if you're doing a voter pool sample in 2018 voters, you're going to be sampling more Democrats than Republicans based on the percentage of turnout and independent voters. You see, let's say, so your voter models, for example, you know how pollsters come up with a voter model? Pollsters come out with a voter model by looking at the percentage of people who voted in 2018. Let's say it is 50% Democrat, 40% Republican, 10% independent. So when you do your voter sample, first of all, you base it on the registered voters who participated in 2018. That's a million people, let's say. So you got 1 million people who participated in the election in 2018. And then you say, I'm going to make 50% of them Democrat. I'm going to make 40% of them Republican. I'm going to make 10% of them independent. When I survey, I'm going to call and ask, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Are you an independent? Oh, Democrat. Okay, I got to add this one. Are you an independent? Well, I've already got too many independents. I don't need this person's vote. And so you narrow down. You call 5,000 households. You get a pool of 1,000 people who meet your profile. You've got, of those people, let's see, how does the math work? You've got 500 of them will be Democrat, 400 of them will be Republican, 100 of them will be moderate, which are independent, which is great because you can also subsample the 500 and the 400. That's a big enough sample to give you a pretty good accurate representation for your presidential race. That's not what the AJC did, unfortunately. But I know people who have done that sort of polling. And they went in and they broke it down based on the model turnout from 2018. They found people who actually voted in 2018, and that's their model pool of voters to call. And guess what? It was predominant Democrat. There were more Democrats in the survey than there were Republicans, because in 2018, more Democrats showed up than Republicans. And guess what? Brian Kemp's popularity is over 60%. David Perdue's popularity is over 50% as well. That polling strikes me as way more accurate than what the AJC did, and yet the AJC, even with an inaccurate poll that oversamples graduate voters who voted against Kemp and Democrats who voted against Kemp, still found Brian Kemp at 54%. Still found Brian Kemp with a third of black support. By the way, I'm told in the private polling that Brian Kemp's black support is closer to 40%, not a third. Not 33%, but closer to 40%. Brian Kemp's Hispanic support is closer to 50%, not 44%. So the AJC can be adjusted somewhat for that, bump the numbers up a little bit, and you get close to where these other independent polls are showing. But by and large, the bottom line is that Brian Kemp is extremely popular among black voters, white voters, Hispanic voters, Asian voters, across the board. He's popular with Democrats, although less so than with Republicans. He's popular with independents. He's doing a good job. The economy counts. There is news out that we are tied for record low unemployment in Georgia. We have not seen as low an unemployment number since 1976. On top of that, we're at a record high jobs numbers. Now, how does that work? Well, there are more jobs in Georgia now than there were in 1976. So you've got unemployment is tied for the lowest it's ever been, but the number of jobs available in Georgia is way higher than it was back then, and they're all full. So we got record high employment and low unemployment tied for 1976. Now, will it last? Probably not. More and more people think the economy is going to go downhill. But for right now, it's good news for Governor Kemp. People are happy with him. They like him. And they like, in fact, they like that the governor is preparing a rainy day fund. They like that he wants the fiscal house of Georgia to get in order now, knowing that hard times may be coming. And they understand and they expect that hard times are coming. So for him to have a popularity rating in an AJC poll that is biased against him in its sampling at 54% is really, really good.
As both sides target Georgia for 2020.
You can call in and be a part of the program if you like. 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I took my son yesterday to see Ford versus Ferrari. That is a good movie. If you don't know the story of Ken Miles, I won't give everything away to you. It was an entertaining movie, even if you knew the history. And I did. Knew the history, knew the photograph that was so famous, Ford winning Le Mans, and then Miles dying tragically thereafter. And I really wish they had ended the movie at the end of the race as opposed to ending it after Miles dies. He was a listen. I'm sorry if it's a spoiler. It happened in the 1960s. Learn history. Miles was a test driver. He was a racer. He was very hard-headed, very opinionated, very strong-willed. And after that famous race, was getting a car ready for the next round and died tragically testing the car. Couldn't get out of the car as it caught on fire. And I was kind of sad for my son. Really liked it. So I've never been a car person. I have never ever been a car person. And my 10-year-old has developed a fixation with cars. The Mustang in particular is his favorite. He loves Mustangs. He likes the redesigned Camaro from Chevy, but he really likes the Mustang a lot. And he wanted to go see this movie, and it's totally appropriate for kids. There's some profanity in it, but it is a totally appropriate movie. Very appropriate, very good stuff. And it was a totally entertaining movie. My wife, who never goes to movies, wanted to go see this movie as well. And she loved it just as much as the kid did. So I do recommend it. It's #1 at the box office this weekend. That Charlie's Angels movies, my goodness. I saw the preview for Charlie's Angels and thought, this is garbage. How can anyone think that this movie is going to be a good idea? And it is tanking, absolutely crashing at the box office. No one wants to see it, and I don't blame them. It looks absolutely stupid, and by all accounts, it is. Some days I think I could get a job being paid a lot of money to go to Hollywood and just watch the movies and say, no, this sucks, don't do it, and save them the heartache of putting a movie in the public. Some movies are just better left smothered after being done than actually put out there for the public to see. Charlie's Angels. Why did we need a Charlie's Angels reboot? Particularly one that does not have Drew Barrymore. You know, the original Charlie's Angels movie was actually a pretty good movie with Drew Barrymore and what is it, Lucy Liu or whatever. It was a good movie. It was humorous. The second one not so great. The first one was good, but this was stupid. I just saw the trailer and could tell it was stupid. Ford versus Ferrari, though, it was a good movie. Now, I have avoided as best I can talking about impeachment because I'm getting bored with impeachment. I imagine most of you are as well. There is news on that front, though, and we need to explore impeachment. And I will finally, at the end of the show today, I will get into impeachment by the end of the show. I guess I mean the third hour. When we come back, let me give you the highlights of what happened over the weekend on the Sunday shows with impeachment, where the Democrats are headed. Nancy Pelosi trying to be high-minded and bipartisan or nonpartisan. It's not working. Meanwhile, the Democrats are peddling conspiracy theories about the president's health because he went to Walter Reed and got a checkup and won't tell the media what it's about. They're convinced he's dying, and it's kind of sad. You can see him almost rooting for it, which is pathetic. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The final hour of the show today. The phone number 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Glad to have you joining me this hour across the state of Georgia. Real quick, I occasionally try to highlight good things where you can be of help to people. The Sampler family in Marietta, they are heavily involved in adoption and foster care in the state of Georgia. Jason works with one of the big foster care and adoption Christian nonprofits in the state, and this family is trying to keep together 4 siblings. These 4 kids live in Colombia in South America, and their family has their parents have been killed, and so the Sampler family is willing to adopt all 4 of them to keep them together. The family is in danger of being broken up. 2 of the children being adopted by a couple in Italy, and the other 2 being divided out. So you would have one with one family, one with another, and then 2 in Italy. And all of the families have agreed if someone could adopt all 4 children, it would be for the best given the trauma in their lives. The Sampler family, they live in Marietta, Georgia. They heard about this through an international adoption agency, and they are raising money to adopt these 4 children and bring them into their home. But they need help. They need help because adoptions are super expensive. International adoptions are very expensive. They've got to have $40,000 to make this happen. And I am willing to use my microphone to cast light on this. If you want to learn more about it and decide whether or not it's something you might want to support, text the word support to 33777. Text the word support to 33777. Learn about the Sampler family story and their willingness to open their homes and their hearts to 4 children who have lost their parents to keep these siblings together. I do think if you can keep 4 kids together, it's worth doing, and they're willing to do it. And I'm glad that there's a couple like that out there willing to help. So again, text support to 33777 to learn more. I have intentionally, if you're just tuning in now, this is where impeachment comes in, and I want to be very honest with you in that I'm increasingly put off by impeachment. It is a news story, and it is a relevant news story, and I try to cover the news of the day every day here on this program. But it's not really advancing anything. The Democrats aren't changing anyone's mind, despite what Nancy Pelosi claims or says or tries to do. I want to step back into last week real quick, and I want to talk about Jeffrey Toobin, who I'm not a big fan of on CNN, but he did raise some issues about the Democrats' impeachment strategy, and I didn't get to play this audio the other day, and I want to play it now because it's still deeply relevant. Listen to this.
I think the Democrats are making a choice here, which I don't know is necessarily the right choice. There are 2 witnesses who could really talk about what Donald Trump himself said about the relationship with Ukraine, because they are the ones who saw him every day. Remember, the Republican defense here is that all these lower-level witnesses are just hearsay witnesses used to testify so far. Their legal position is somewhat different, but in fact, they have said they're not going to testify, absent a court order. As you heard from Congressman Heck, they're not going to court. They are simply think they have enough without these 2 witnesses. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. I mean, that's a big sacrifice to give up those 2 witnesses.
He says, Denny Heck says, we're not going to play rope-a-dope. Basically,
he said that 4 times. I don't know. I mean,
but it's time. It's timing. It's timing. You go to court, this is weeks or months.
Yes.
It is. No, obviously it's all about timing.
They don't have weeks or months in their mind.
Well, but you could also do 2 things at once. I mean, you could pursue this case while you are, the Intelligence Committee hearing is next week and probably the week after. You're going to have hearings before the Judiciary Committee sometime later in December. I don't know why you give up on these witnesses without even trying to expedite a court hearing. I mean, maybe it is too slow. Maybe they're too risky. I mean, maybe they think these witnesses will turn on them. I just think if you want to know the facts, you would really want to hear from Mulvaney and Bolton.
Yeah, if you wanted to know the facts, you would really want to hear from Mulvaney and Bolton. This is becoming problematic in that the Democrats are really trying to shape a narrative They're not really trying to find all of the facts. They're trying to put their best witnesses forward, not all of the witnesses forward. They're blocking Republicans. And by the way, on Elise Stefanik, you need to understand that she is she's a good Republican, and she made a great name and show of herself on Friday. She's been attacked. Even George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, called her trash. He's totally in the opposition to Trump camp right now. But you need to understand that what she did on Friday was theatrics. Elise Stefanik, for those of you who aren't familiar, she kept trying to have time on Friday to ask questions, and Adam Schiff refused to recognize her. The Republicans said they were shutting up a woman. Here are the facts. The facts are that the rules that were voted on give the chairman and ranking member both 45 minutes to ask questions. The only people that they're allowed to yield to are the counsels for the Republicans and Democrats. They can't yield to members. When Stefanik and Jim Jordan say that Adam Schiff did yield to a Democratic member, what he yielded to was a Democratic member asking a question about the procedure, not asking a question of the witness. So it was absolutely theatrics. But at the same time, when Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker have stood up in the past and engaged in similar theatrics to defy the rules to ask questions, the media praised both of them. Cory Booker's Spartacus moment, Elizabeth Warren, her nevertheless she persisted nonsense. They were in defiance of the rules, and the media loved it. They ate it up, and now they're calling Elise Stefanik trash for engaging in the same theatrics. There's absolutely a double standard, and in doing a double standard, it is very clear that the Democrats are only trying to tell one side of the story, which means I shouldn't have to care about this.
But, I agree with Rob. I received a lot of messages this week from people saying, I just want to watch my soap operas. Right. People don't care about what they're doing. They know this is yet another witch hunt. The Americans know that this president is being harassed by the Democrats.
Yes.
And I don't think they see a way out of it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we can talk about that a bit later in the show is that the louder the Democrats kind of shout about what particular thing they're accusing him of, the more obvious it is that they're the ones who are actually guilty of that.
Right.
There's some really good examples of that. Rob, would you have?
Well, I was just going to say, Katrina, you bring up the soap opera. So we all know that impeachment is a soap opera. It's just not the soap opera that Americans want to watch, as a matter of fact.
Well, it's not, and it's not even interesting or entertaining. I mean, you bring up witnesses who didn't witness anything. Right. So there's no there. I mean, even if there was something that we could talk about and debate, but there just really isn't anything there. I mean, the president was right. He made a phone call to an incoming president. He was doing his duty as president by saying, hey, we're hearing about these allegations. Can you look into this? Because people forget, if you back up the timeline just a couple of months, they forget that it was the Ukrainian government making the allegations against the Bidens. So the president was well within his right to ask about it.
That was a Fox News panel with Steve Hilton, and you can say it's just Fox, but Fox has the most eyeballs, and that message is resonating, and the Democrats are failing to penetrate the actual story of where things go. There was also the issue of the president's tweet. And tweet storm, I should say, during Marie Yovanovitch's testimony. Jake Tapper asked my buddy Scott Jennings about that on CNN.
Your expression makes it look like, Scott, that you don't buy it. You don't think that's witness intimidation.
No, look, I think the Democrats would be on a lot firmer ground here if they wouldn't want to continue to try to impeach the president over his tweets. That doesn't make it tactically smart. I mean, I think this testimony could have come and gone Friday without much notice, frankly, had he not elevated. But putting
that certainly was the highlight or the low light of the day. I mean, I think that's...
But putting it in the articles of impeachment strikes me as a massive overreach. And they may want to go back to their focus groups. They've already focus grouped this once to try to figure out what to call the impeachment. And they may want to go back and see if impeaching a president over his tweets works.
Yeah. The Democrats and their witness intimidation. See, this is all theatrics. The president understands it's theatrics, and the Democrats aren't going to beat the president at theatrics. If the Democrats want to beat the president at impeachment, then they need to go beyond theatrics, and they're just stooping down to the president's level as they see it, and they're trying to play to their own base. They're not trying to persuade anyone. Again, I played this clip earlier. This is Molly Ball. Molly Ball was with The Atlantic. She's now with Time. She's on CNN. She's actually the person who did the big profile of me in 2015, calling me the most powerful conservative in America. This is Molly Ball on this.
The fact is, this is a partisan impeachment. It was when they had the vote, it was a almost purely party line vote. Only Democrats are for it. They can't do anything about that if the Republicans don't want to come along.
That's true, but they got to find a way to persuade Republican senators because they need 2/3 of the Senate to convict. And they're not. And it doesn't help when you got Nancy Pelosi out there saying nonsense like this.
Does the president get, as he says, to confront his accuser or get due
What do you mean
process.
confront his accuser? Confront the whistleblower?
Presumably,
Well,
that's what
I
it
will
means.
make sure he does not intimidate the whistleblower. So the president could come right before the committee and speak all the truth that he wants if he
You
wants
don't
to.
expect him
if
to
he
do
wants
that.
to take the oath of office, or he could do it in writing. He has every opportunity to present his case. But it's really a sad thing. I mean, what the president did was so much worse than even what Richard Nixon did. But at some point, Richard Nixon cared about the country enough to recognize that this could not continue. The Intelligence Committee is leading this part of the inquiry. There are other depositions that are being taken by more committees. So some of the depositions will continue, and then what takes place in the intelligence public will continue for another week. I don't know how much longer. I guess it depends on how many more witnesses they have. That's up to the committee. I don't guide that. That's up to the committee.
Okay. Nancy, it's really worse than y'all. This is not a Democratic talking point that I think resonates. The president asked Ukraine to investigate a political opponent, and Ukraine did not investigate. And they got the money that they weren't going to get. They still got it. Compared with Richard Nixon, must we revise history? This is like the Stacey Abrams clip I played earlier of Stacey Abrams revising the history of the Electoral College to make it a racist thing when it specifically was not. To say that what Donald Trump did is worse than Richard Nixon is to be ignorant if it happened. Richard Nixon wanted to get dirt on the Democratic campaign for his reelection in 1972. And Republican operatives broke into the Watergate building where the Democratic National Committee had its headquarters and stole information relating to the 1972 election. And then Richard Nixon helped them, using the power of the presidency, helped cover up what was happening. It was a direct abuse of office. It was trying to get the FBI to investigate his political opponents, firing the special prosecutor who was investigating what had happened, and it became a bipartisan thing. It is absolutely true, absolutely historically accurate to say that the Republicans, the entire time it was going on, pounded their chest and said, there's no there. There's nothing here. There's nothing to report. Move on. There's nothing to see. And then the Supreme Court said that Nixon's tapes needed to be released. He secretly recorded his White House conversations. The Supreme Court ruled that as a matter of impeachment, those tapes can come forward, and Nixon promptly resigned. Because it was very clear that Richard Nixon was complicit in ordering and then covering up a break-in of the Democratic National Committee, among other things, in using the powers of government to investigate his political opponents. Now, it is fair for the Democrats to say that's exactly what Donald Trump wanted. He wanted use the power of the presidency to force a foreign government to investigate a political opponent. And yeah, there is an argument to be made there, but it didn't happen. He didn't obstruct funds for Ukraine. They didn't know at the time money was being held up. They got the money. There are great differences between the president of the United States engaging in a sustained cover-up of a break-in of the Democratic National Committee and this president asking for a favor which he did not get. And if you're going to say that Trump is worse than Nixon, you are deranged when it comes to American politics. Was it good? No. Was it Nixon? No. It was not nearly as bad as what Nixon did in the grand scheme of things, or even lesser schemes of things. It was not. And it's ridiculous for the Democrats to go there because it reinforces the Republican argument that the Democrats are making this all a partisan affair and they do not actually care about what actually happened.
Politics, news, religion. Erick Erickson talks about all the things you're not supposed to talk about every weekday. And some cook.
I got to play this audio for you. Our friends at Grabian have done this master cut of the Democrats trying to figure out how they're going to advance in 2020. Listen to this.
I think what the Democratic Party is going to do over the course of the next 18 months is walk and chew gum. And what do I mean by that, Brett? We must, as Democrats, walk and chew gum, and that's exactly what we're doing. Well, Democrats can walk and chew gum, and we can walk and chew gum at the DNC. As I've said, walking and chewing gum. Reverend, I think Democrats can walk and chew gum. I get the tenor of your question, and I understand that, but actually the American people can walk and chew gum. We got to walk and chew gum. And frankly, the American people walk and chew gum, and all of our candidates can walk and chew gum.
She called this lawsuit a silly distraction, and I wonder if your response to that.
Well, we can walk and chew gum. And folks, let me assure you, Democrats know how to walk and chew gum.
That's going to be their 2020 strategy. They're going to walk and chew gum at the same time. We'll find out on Wednesday as they come to Atlanta to the Tyler Perry studio to debate, with Pete Buttigieg moving into the lead in Iowa pretty significantly. And now Buttigieg is at the forefront. And I got to tell you, the campaign seems absolutely tone deaf. So Buttigieg's husband put out a picture on Instagram of Buttigieg at the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, and that it was just a nice picture. I think the caption was all something like "this guy," some such. There is a meme on the internet though of white gay dudes going to the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin and putting the picture up. Of themselves, selfies of themselves at the Berlin Holocaust Memorial. And it has caught on in the prevailing zeitgeist against Pete Buttigieg, where a lot of gay rights activists don't like the guy. And a lot of Democrats increasingly don't like the guy. And it's just another example of him being out of touch, putting essentially a picture designed to be an attractive picture of Buttigieg where he's standing in the middle of a Holocaust memorial. Who does that? And if it was a one-off thing, you could say, okay, no big deal. But there's more to it than that. Buttigieg has unveiled his plan for black families, and the stock photos he's used have come from Kenya, from Africa, for an American black family. On top of that, Buttigieg has also required that people opt out of supporting him. Who does this? He's got a plan for black families. He has submitted it to various people, and he's telling them they need to affirmatively say no, they don't support it, or else they're going to be listed as a supporter. A left-wing publication called The Intercept ran the numbers on it, and 60% of the people who have supported Buttigieg's plan for black families are white. He's got a bunch of white people supporting his plan for black families. He doesn't have black people supporting his plan. So he's coming to Atlanta now tomorrow on Wednesday in the run-up to the Democratic debate, and he wants to unveil a plan to make education more affordable for people. And that's going to be his thing. And he's trying to shift the conversation to make himself look like a front runner. But here's the problem for Buttigieg. Buttigieg has raised a lot of money from a lot of rich liberals. He really is something that white people like. Black people do not like. He continues to flub his rollout into the black community. He continues to do tone-deaf things. He's playing into every bad stereotype of rich millennial progressives. The media is starting to call him out on that. I got to tell you, the way the media is turning on these people, they build them up and then they turn against them. Is it any wonder even the Democrats have a hard time trusting the media on stuff like this? And they're doing it with Buttigieg now, too. They're turning on Buttigieg. Buttigieg is bad now. He's got to get himself ready to be the front runner. Everybody is setting their sights on him. We will see if he has the staying power on Wednesday night, because they're going to be coming for him on that debate stage on Wednesday night. Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren both treat him very dismissively. Kamala Harris as well, who is cratering in her polling, is thinking she's getting beaten by an upstart mayor with a history of bad race relations in South Bend, Indiana. She's got problems with him. Across the board, the Democrats have problems with Buttigieg, and now he's going to be in pole position on the Democratic debate stage Wednesday night in Atlanta. And so he's coming, trying to trot out more initiatives that he thinks might appeal to black audiences. And he's not resonating with him. Y'all, it does not help that your stock photos come from Kenya for black families in the United States of America. But that's exactly what Buttigieg did. The tone deafness in all of this is absolutely staggeringly appalling that he would do that. You want some extra fun here? The continuing resolution to continue to fund the government is about to run out. Yeah. There's a real question as to whether or not the president will begin a shutdown of the federal government in response to the impeachment, and he can because the continuing resolution that's been funding the government is about to run out. Rather problematic for the Democrats and the Republicans right now. The president, they're not sure what the president is going to do. They're going to continue to play this out and see. Joe Biden has spoken. Where was he? He was at a rally, and he's continuing to make his electability case against President Trump.
No, it's not going to be easy to beat him. We're talking about this is going to be a cakewalk. He's going to have $1 billion. He's going to have an awful lot of the same kind of negative campaigns that he's run in the past. And he's not going to be that easy to beat. So we better be careful about who we nominate.
Yep, got to be careful who we nominate because he's going to be real hard to beat, he says. Real hard to beat. That's true. Meanwhile, you've got Bernie Sanders out on the campaign trail. I got to be honest here. In fact, let me see. Real Clear Politics. What is the polling average now? Just so we set the stage here for this. Biden is at 26. Warren is at 20. Sanders is at 17. The remarkable staying power of Joe Biden in the Real Clear Politics polling average is something to behold. He started in December of 2018, before he was even announced, at 29. He's at 26 now in the Real Clear Politics polling average, the lowest he has ever been. Whoa, what did I do to the graph here? Come on. The lowest Joe Biden has ever been in the polling is, well, no, let me reset it here. The lowest he's been is 20. Well, the lowest he's ever been is it looks like now he's at 26, and that's tied for the lowest. But he's never gotten above it, and Elizabeth Warren has only been able to get close to him once. She got it 26.6 to Biden, 26.4, but he's hanging on, and he's definitely. The trend lines haven't looked good for Biden, but he's holding on. He's 5 points ahead in the polling averages. And this translates poorly for the rest of the Democrats, but particularly it translates poorly for Bernie Sanders, who he can't get any more momentum because Elizabeth Warren has gotten ahead of him and Pete Buttigieg is outshining him, and he's doing his best, and he's trying to play the old school progressive. What I find actually very funny about it is that millennials are backing Bernie Sanders over Buttigieg and Warren. If Sanders were to get out, Warren could potentially beat Biden, but Sanders is not going to get out. He thinks it's his turn, even though he's not a Democrat. That's the other thing. The Democrats humoring Bernie Sanders, who is not a Democrat. He's an independent. Why they're letting him in the primary process if he refuses to be a Democrat is beyond me, but here he is on stage. There's a relevant point to be made regarding impeachment on this.
I think that what you're going to see in the next weeks to come is this president will be impeached, and he should be impeached. And he should be impeached because he has used his office to obstruct justice. He should be impeached because he is in violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution, and where he has very blatantly, really incredibly, used his office to make more money for his family. And lastly, of course, he should be impeached because he has used national security aid to Ukraine in order to try to undermine a potential political opponent.
Now, what's so interesting here is he lists a bunch of things before he gets to Ukraine that aren't in play with the Democrats. And you can kind of understand why some Democrats are frustrated with Nancy Pelosi, that she's not letting them have a free-for-all on impeachment. But Pelosi understands the clock. She's got to get something through the House of Representatives as quickly as possible. I got to tell you, though, if Sanders is supposed to be a juror, I think our forefathers in this country did not appreciate the level of partisanship this country would get to. George Washington, ironically, I think did, where he warned about party politics. The rest of them did not. And in so doing, you've got Bernie Sanders, who is running out there saying the president needs to be impeached for all of these things. Things they aren't even talking about. How can Donald Trump get a fair trial in the United States Senate? How can he get a fair trial? If you got Bernie Sanders out there, Elizabeth Warren's out there, Kamala Harris is out there, Cory Booker's out there, you got 6 senators running. Almost all of them have taken a position that Donald Trump needs to go, that Donald Trump is corrupt, that Donald Trump needs to be impeached. How can we expect him to get a fair trial in the Senate with the Democrats who are out to get him? I don't know that that's possible. Well, the Republicans, to a degree, are pushing back on all of this. Here is Kayleigh McEnany. She is going on offense on behalf of the Republicans against Bernie Sanders, not specifically per se about Bernie Sanders going after the president. She's going after him on the billionaire tax that they want, where they've enlisted the New York Times and others, and Elizabeth Warren going after him. But this is a message that actually is polling well with voters, not Republicans. You need to understand that the majority of voters in this country, though they are somewhat jealous of wealth, they understand that the wealthy in this country can spend their
Paying your fair share of taxes.
Now, I hate to say this, but you know, this income inequality issue, beating up the billionaires, saying, come on, you could afford just a few extra $1 million in tax, that's a powerful line. How'd you go after it?
Not to the extent that Bernie is taking it, though. He's tweeted that billionaires should not exist. Stuart, we live in an aspirational country. We live in a country where people want to harness the American dream, want to aspire to be a billionaire or a millionaire or a successful person one day. It's all boats to be risen, and that's happening in the Trump administration. Wages growing at the fastest pace in a decade and twice as fast for low and middle income Americans. We want that to happen, but we don't want to abolish the American dream and billionaires and the aspirational nature that makes this country great.
Okay, we hear you. Kayleigh McEnany, thanks for joining us.
Yes, this is becoming an issue. You know, the New York Times ran a big story about FedEx this weekend not paying taxes. FedEx's chief, Fred Smith, and you need to understand, FedEx has been very embattled. I like FedEx. In fact, I much prefer going to a FedEx Kinko's than I do to a UPS store. I think it is a better, it is a way better organization. I think it is easier to get in and out of the Kinko's. They are better at what they do. They have more services. The UPS guy is more reliable. Listen, and I love our UPS guy, our standard UPS guy. He's a great guy. The kids like him. My wife likes him. He's a great guy. But UPS in and of itself, we've had all sorts of problems with them in our neighborhood, at our home, in dealing with it, in trying to ship stuff with them. We never have a problem with FedEx. Well, FedEx has benefited from the tax cuts by the president and the Republicans. And FedEx, according to the New York Times, says FedEx's tax bill has gone down to zero. FedEx has pushed back very aggressively on this and said that that the New York Times has gotten it wrong. And the chairman of FedEx, Fred Smith, has released a statement saying he would like to debate Arthur Schultz, the publisher of the New York Times, and their business editor, because guess what? The New York Times paid no tax. The year the New York Times is attacking is who do you want to believe provides more value to the American economy? FedEx and all of its employees delivering packages, or the New York Times and its news service? Which one delivers more to the American economy? Which one delivers? But so you do need to understand that FedEx did pay taxes. The New York Times has misrepresented their taxes. The New York Times has misrepresented the amount they've paid. But also there's the corporate income tax altogether, because corporate corporations do not pay income tax. Corporations pass on the income tax to consumers who raise their prices or they've reduced their workforce to cover the costs. And in so doing, you and I pay more. If you cut the corporate income tax, the exact same setup with the president's corporate income tax, the very thing that they're complaining about at the New York Times. You cut the income tax, and what happened? Well, at my other job, the one that actually pays me a salary, I don't actually get as an employee because they weren't being taxed on it. I know plenty of people who got checks from their employers at various companies because the income tax got cut. I know businesses that were able to invest. They were able to buy new equipment and stimulate the economy. If anything, the corporate tax has